All right, here we go. Now that that's done, we can actually have some fun. We just recorded a nice quick pitch video, and we're going to talk about Joltz. We're going to talk about stable coins on Lightning. Oh my gosh, is that controversial? What is that like? It's finally here. Taproot Assets, minting, saving developers thousands of hours with all of these fun things, rewards. He's on the tip of the spear. I'm lucky to be with him talking about it. Praised by some Lightning Labs people personally to me. And a lot of people are very excited about this. We're going to get into it, and we're going to get into it quick. Ian, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Mike. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, some potentially controversial topics, but I think we'll unpack this a little bit, and I think folks will see what we're trying to do. But yeah, hard to not be excited when Bitcoin's doing what Bitcoin does.
Right. And we both had to just close the Bitcoin charts here so we don't get distracted, because we might hit 100K as we're recording this, but we wouldn't know. All right, let's do a little housekeeping here. And first things first, this is joltzrewards.com. And I want to draw attention to the fact that they have a header at the top here that says Thunder Funder. Joltz is crowdfunding, an equity crowdfunding round, okay, on Thunder Funder, which is a new crowdfunding portal where you can invest in Bitcoin and open source startups. Okay, so this isn't like a GoFundMe or things like that. These are real investments that we are democratizing to the plebs out there to provide access to areas that are previously largely inaccessible. Okay, so this is an opportunity to do so. This is Jolt's website here. You can view their SDK, those API docs. For anyone who wants to give them a follow, that's Joltz_BTC on X. And this is Thunder Funder. For anyone who might want to sign up, it is free. You can view the Joltz opportunity here. You can read about them. You can join the community. We're just very early with messaging and some other things that we're rolling out for our site, but it's going to be a great way to complete your profile, maybe do some co-founder matching, shoot some messages off, and have a lot of fun. And you can do a bit more of a deep dive on Joltz right here. So, all right. So first off, let's get into it. Ian, we've been hearing about Taproot Assets for such a long time now. Okay.
Yes.
So you don't have to pretend like we don't have technical knowledge, because my technical knowledge limitations, I did once build a dice game in Python. That might be the apex of my coding career. But talk to us about Taproot Assets. Why is this a big idea, specifically with the stable coins? And we know about the volume for everyone who wants to watch the pitch where you go into some of the stable coin volume. But why is this a big deal? What is going on?
Yeah, so for those not familiar, Lightning Labs, who is behind LND, by far the largest implementation of the Lightning Network, announced what was previously called Taro. So for those that may have heard that term back in 2022, that was announced. And so a couple years later, you now have Taproot Assets finally on mainnet. And the goal of Taproot Assets is to make Bitcoin, and then by extension, the Lightning Network, a multi-asset network. And so this will sound controversial to some. Why would we want this on Bitcoin? First of all, what's really nice about the Taproot Assets protocol is it's extremely chain efficient, right? So there's meta protocols like runes and ordinals where all of that data is getting chiseled directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain. Taproot Assets, a lot of that metadata associated with those assets is stored off chain. And what's getting written down to Bitcoin is a very, very compact, small bit of data. So you're able to facilitate these additional use cases in a highly chain efficient way. And arguably even more importantly, you're able to then lift those assets into Lightning channels, just as you would create a Lightning channel with sats. And so this makes the Lightning Network capable of being this sort of like FX exchange network in a very similar way as to you've seen companies like Strike really do this in a way in which they're using fiat banking connectivity to sort of interoperate Bitcoin with fiat currencies. Taproot Assets really just enables a lot of that to be done natively on Bitcoin with the use of stablecoins. And you alluded to some of the volume statistics I was throwing out earlier. I do think that's important to motivate this discussion. I think our big discovery as a company is that meeting people where they are really matters. And like, if I could wave a magic wand and just immediately usher us to hyper Bitcoinization and we're just like magically there, obviously that would be ideal, but we're not. And even if you look at some of us early adopters of Bitcoin, like even we might be a little hesitant still to pay for things with Bitcoin. So let alone the billions and billions of other people who may not have any Bitcoin. And even if they did, they have other challenges and problems. So meeting people where they are in terms of their existing unit of account, which is really the stickiest habit in someone's life, that is what Taproot Assets really allows us to do. And instead of people going on blockchains like Tron or Ethereum or Solana, they can do so on the mother chain that is Bitcoin. And why would you not want to do that?
Okay, so let's break this down so that I can understand it and hopefully some other people can too. So right now, if you want to interact with stable coins, whether that's USDC, which I guess is on maybe all of these other sort of blockchains, right? Depending on the gas fees and whatever, there's another cost associated with it there, right? There's gas on Ethereum or some of these other things to transact, right? So question is, will there be a Bitcoin gas fee for these sort of stable coins that are happening on Bitcoin? That's number one, is how does sort of the fee work with that? Number two, how does that work with the current wallet interface where we're at? Okay, so those people that were early with ordinals or some of these other things, which is not really our crowd, but if you're early with ordinals and you sent them to your, wallet of Satoshi or your mobile wallet, adios. That's kind of it. And I know some people who were playing around with that early and had lost some of those things. So what does the hurdle look like to actually get not only exchanges and the economic providers here, but like the wallets that we use and know every day, for them to add this sort of integration? How would that display? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll go in reverse order. On the topic of kind of wallet integrations, that's a big part of what we're doing at Joltz. So we're developing a SDK or software development kit that would enable other wallets to easily add support for Taproot Assets with a few lines of code, as opposed to building, again, spending the thousands of hours to build all this scaffolding, build all this technology to be able to do that. So that's like one piece of it, is we want to make it really easy for wallets to adopt and enable support for Taproot Assets using the Joltz SDK. Now, the nice thing about Taproot Assets is even before that happens, there is great interoperability between Taproot Assets and Sats on Lightning. So for example, what can happen is, let's say that I am using a wallet and I'm trying to send a Taproot asset to you, Mike, and you're using a wallet that doesn't have Taproot Asset support. That's actually okay. You can still receive that value as Sats. So I can still send value from my side. And even though you don't have a wallet that supports Taproot Assets, you can still receive it as Bitcoin. So that interoperability and being able to leverage the existing network effect of Lightning is also part of what makes Taproot Assets really special. On the topic of gas fees, it's Bitcoin. It's just Bitcoin. So for example, I can mint a Taproot asset. To mint a Taproot asset, that actually happens on chain first. So I would pay the typical network fee to do any on-chain transaction. And then what I can do is lift that asset and open a Taproot asset channel to bring that asset into Lightning, from which I can then send and receive over Lightning in a similar fashion as to how you do Sats today. So very nicely packaged and interoperable with the existing Lightning infrastructure.
So when you think about these other developers with your SDK, I mean, you're relying on Phoenix, Wallet of Satoshi, Breeze. Everyone's going to have to add these stable coins to their wallets independently. And do you see how is that viewed? I mean, is it viewed as a shit coin? Is it viewed as we don't need this on Bitcoin? Or is there like overwhelming support for this to get away from some of these other chains? Things?
Yeah, I think from like a really kind of purist definition, maybe we don't, there's some stigma around this, but if you talk to actual wallet developers on the ground, there's a number of examples. Elysium Wallet is a good example where they have support for Lightning, for on-chain Bitcoin, and also for some of the key stable coins via like Polygon or Ethereum. And the only reason they're using those technologies is because it wasn't previously possible with Bitcoin. So a lot of these wallets have added support for stablecoins using other blockchains because there is that market demand. There is about 3 orders of magnitude, so about 1,000 times more payment volume for stablecoins as there is for Bitcoin on the Lightning Network today. So that gulf, that gap, gives us a really clear indication, and particularly in some of the markets we're focused on, like Brazil, that appetite for stablecoins is huge, and app developers and wallet developers they either have to push that off and ignore it, or they have to use other blockchains to be able to support it.
I want to talk about the address format here and just really simplify that, if it's unified or not. So if you were paying me for something and you were paying me stable coins on Lightning, how does that address look? Is it just how does that invoice sort of work? Is it unified? If it does one address I could send, how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So if I'm sending you like an on-chain Taproot asset, that can just go to a regular Taproot address, that most wallets now support. If I want to send the value to you on Lightning, this goes back to one of Lightning's arguably challenges, in that the recipient, needs to first create an invoice. So you would go and create an invoice, right? And you would have a special piece of information embedded in that invoice that corresponds to the asset that you're looking to receive. And so it's up to the wallet. And I'll note that Joltz will have the Joltz wallet as well, that would be available for any end user. You'll have just like a little drop down of assets, right? So you can abstract away a lot of that complexity and say, hey, I want to receive this asset. I want to receive this much of that asset. Here you go. Here's the invoice. And then I can pay that invoice in a very similar fashion as to how it works today with Lightning. What we're also building right as we speak is the ability to key send Taproot assets, meaning the ability to just directly push value from A to B in a kind of Lightning address-like format. So that's also something that you'll see come, that I think will make it a lot easier for users to just directly push and send value.
So with the current stablecoin world, right? Circle just filed confidentially for an IPO, actually about a year ago. They've been waiting. Tether. How does the relationship with the large incumbent stablecoin landscape work with sort of this novel new way of doing it on Bitcoin? Are those conversations that happen with Joltz, or is there plans? Did you have any commitments from someone like Tether, who really does a lot with liquid? How does the existing stablecoin landscape adopt and come over here? Or are those conversations that maybe Lightning Labs has from a protocol developer level? How does that work?
Yeah. No, you're hitting on a number of those pieces. So a lot of those discussions are being sort of spearheaded by Lightning Labs, as you would expect. They have a great relationship with Tether. Circle's the other big one, of course. Little alpha, we are told it's a when, not if, that Tether will issue natively USDT as a Taproot asset. Timing wise, tough to guess, right? Tough to estimate. These big providers historically take their time, right? They look at the ecosystem. They look at maybe smaller assets that go live, similar to what we partnered with Yulen, the Brazilian stablecoin issuer, which just went live a couple of weeks ago. So they're going to look at these smaller projects, make sure the tech is all battle tested. And so that's going to be the kind of process that Lightning Labs spearheads a lot of those conversations. We Joltz can be brought in to help demonstrate that, like, hey, this tech is real. There's real users, there's real, usage. And so the other nice part is that we're already seeing some experiments and different companies in the Taproot Assets ecosystem. Speed Wallet is one, LNFi is another, where they're basically creating like a wrapped version of Tether that can then be used by users as a Taproot asset. And so that's yet another way to demonstrate traction for the Tethers of the world to see, okay, like there is significant usage here that helps them build their business case for expanding to this additional network. And a company like Circle actually makes it like really nice, that sort of roadmap. They're like, hey, we welcome you to go and create this kind of wrapped version of USDC on whatever network you're working on. And then if you can demonstrate a certain level of traction, there's a process by which they'll just take that over and make it an official USDC and Circle sponsored thing. So that's also an interesting path. And so what we Joltz are contributing to that whole process is we're in the early stages of building a bridge, basically, for people to bring liquidity in from these other ecosystems like Ethereum, Polygon, whatever, and bring that liquidity in, and usage grows from there to the point at which these companies make that final call of like, okay, we're going to formally issue that asset. But those conversations are happening as we speak. So it's a very exciting time.
So, okay. So obviously stablecoins is the big matzo ball, okay, so to speak with this, but the other assets, okay, and use cases for it, how do you leverage this? Are you relying on people to sort of mint their own sort of collectible things, airline miles? I mean, how do you vision a future 5 years from now with the other assets? And I don't know how much time we want to talk about what you were doing before this, but how does it work from a rewards sort of asset thing, use cases?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I mean, our big focus right now currently is obviously stablecoins, given the growth we're seeing everywhere. But as you rightly call out, and as is still somewhat legacy in our website URL, joltzrewards.com, we were actually really focused as a company early last year, on Bitcoin rewards as a service. And one of our clients, a company called Kilo Club, which is a fitness center of all things, was actually the original catalyst that led us down the Taproot Assets kind of rabbit hole, because he was a Bitcoiner, the owner of this gym. It's a beautiful facility in Las Vegas. He's opening additional locations as well. And he's a Bitcoiner, loves Bitcoin, but his whole concern was, hey, like, I want to do this rewards program for my members to incentivize people coming to the gym, to incentivize member retention for the fitness center. But he was concerned about participation if it was just straight up Bitcoin, right? Maybe 10%, 15% of his customer base would like really find that exciting and opt into the program. And so his whole challenge was, hey, how do I build maybe a more interim stepping stone? How do I make it easier and gentler of an on-ramp for people to come into this? And long story short, that's what led us down the Taproot Asset rabbit hole initially, because we're able to do things like tokenized loyalty assets, right? This is a branded, so it'll be like the Kilo token. And again, I know that's a dirty word for many, but it's a loyalty asset, and it can be converted into Bitcoin. So there's a 1 to 1,000 sat, 1 Kilo token to 1,000 sat conversion. So it's backed by Bitcoin. So it's like a reverse rug pull, right? You normally get Starbucks points, and then next year Starbucks devalues and debases the value of those points. Meanwhile, these points actually appreciate in their value, given that they're backed by Bitcoin. So that's a really exciting use case that I think is going to be the genesis for a lot of interesting things we can do in the reward space. And we've built a lot of technology already as a company. We have a Zapier app, so you can use thousands and thousands of different traditional platforms to trigger the rewarding of either Bitcoin or a Taproot asset. So I think that time will come. I think that's probably still a little ways out. And that was part of the reason why we repositioned the company a little bit to really focus more on the stablecoin kind of use cases, given those are more here and now. But there's a lot of really exciting stuff we can do around rewards. We've been approached by like carbon credit companies looking to tokenize carbon credits on the most immutable decentralized ledger that is the Bitcoin blockchain. So the whole kind of like real world asset trend, I don't know what will come of that, but it is interesting. Like, we have had inbound interest from some of those types of entities and companies as well.
So the Joltz wallet is obviously going to be the clear leader for handling all these assets. And right now that is a web app, correct?
Yes. Yeah. We sort of demoed that when I was down in Sao Paulo 2 weeks ago for the SatsConf conference. But we will have a mobile app in test flight here very, very soon that people will be able to get their hands on and start using.
So when you talk about that Kilo token, ironically Kilo, right? 1,000.
Yes, exactly.
And you mentioned it's redeemable for Bitcoin. We're talking about swapping here. And
Yes.
swaps is a big part of something like the Aqua wallet. How do swaps work right now with your relationship there? And how is that going to work? And who's the buyer on the other end for that Kilo token? Because somebody does have to be a buyer, right? Or maybe not.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And that is a good analogy of what we're building is similar to like a side swap that you see in Liquid or a Bolts exchange, right? Which does a lot of work with Liquid as well. Both of those, I think, are embedded in Aqua Wallet. And so similarly, we will have our like Joltz swapping tool built into the Joltz wallet. I'll give you maybe a real example because Kilo Club is still getting built out with DPIX. So this is the Brazilian stablecoin. And what's really interesting about this use case is the Brazilian market has this network of what are called P2P operators. So for those that have like gone on platforms like Bisq or RoboSats, these are platforms by which you can buy Bitcoin peer to peer. And so there's this network of individual operators that like in turn have customers that they provide this type of service. And DPIX, the stablecoin, is really the sort of oil that's being used to facilitate those transactions. So what happens is, let's say I'm a user in Brazil. I want to buy some Bitcoin peer-to-peer. So I can send reals via Pix, which is the internal kind of instant payment settlement system in Brazil. And what gets issued to that P2P operator is DPIX. So there's a one-to-one relationship between the Brazilian reals and DPIX, this stablecoin. The P2P operator is then able to swap DPIX for sats and provide that to the end user. So it sounds a little clunky when I like describe it in detail like that, but it's basically a way for that end user to privately buy or more privately buy Bitcoin. And so how that swap is happening is Yulin, and then similarly Kilo will basically serve as like a market maker on the other end. So there will be this like Bitcoin treasury, if you will, that's in this kind of market making entity. And so I, the user, can swap my DPIX and receive Bitcoin or vice versa from that. So there is going to be either a dedicated market maker for each of these assets, or for the like really big popular assets, I think you're going to see all sorts of different liquidity providers plugging into this, which raises a whole additional kind of interesting discussion about yield making opportunities and exchange making services, which with these edge nodes that are a part of the Taproot Assets infrastructure.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about regulatory challenges, and because that's boring. But, the ability to put this to anyone to create these sort of assets, the large stable coins, I mean, they're all audited and scrutinized. So how does that work? Is there any verifiable, are there audits that have to happen with these sort of things? Because if I was, let's take Speed Wallet, for example, right? When you do a transaction on Speed Wallet, you get some little rewards, your status goes up. You can't sell them or do anything with them. You can't send them to anyone. But, that would be a really cool thing to earn rewards and be able to do more with them. So for something like that, you don't really have to worry too much about the regulatory challenges. Do you foresee anything with the stable coins or something like DPIX, if there are many, many DPIX globally that are sort of entering this area?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in the case of DPIX is a great example. Like, right, they operate in the Brazilian market. They have all the kind of like regulatory and compliance stuff covered for that market in which they serve. We are really just the technology behind the scenes that they're using to do what it is that they want to do. We will have kind of that fully non-custodial suite of solutions here over the next couple months. So we as the tech enabler don't have to necessarily worry about that. That being said, we obviously know that things can change, regulations can change. And so we're talking with quite a few partners, including some of those stablecoin as a service type platforms that you and I were talking about a moment ago, who have a lot of the kind of like licensing and MSB type of stuff. So I definitely don't want anyone to think that this is like every single possible future regulatory question has been answered, because there's certainly a lot of gray areas still. But what I think we will see is that for the actual stable coins that are being used for like payments and different things like that, that issuer is going to have the licensing, or they could use our solution in partnership with another entity that kind of has that licensing almost as a service. Those are probably the two modes of operation that we expect to see.
Yeah, the line between Taproot Assets and Taproot Securities.
Yes.
That
Who knows?
Let's just talk about the past real quick because we've known each other for quite a while, actually, since
Yeah.
before you were really focused 100% on Taproot assets. And you've actually accomplished quite a bit, and you don't really tout it. But you won the pitch contest in 2024 in Nashville. What a great honor.
Yes.
But no, that was
Yeah.
really cool to see because you've been in a few pitch contests. I've seen you pitch for sure. You've went through a couple of accelerator programs, multiple
Yeah.
ones,
Yeah.
and there's probably a lot we can talk about off record with that. But a couple of accelerator programs, and you actually have some pretty a pretty good cap table with some real VCs and investors at this point. You want to do like a high level overview on just starting going through the accelerators, raising some money. And by the way, I mean, you actually have some traction. You've actually done some revenue. Do you want to talk a little bit about from 0 to 1?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's never easy, right? And fundraising is never easy. So for fellow builders and founders listening, just know that it's never easy, and that's always going to be something you're doing in parallel. But it's such an iterative process, right? And I think part of the reason why we going back to zero, right? We had this idea around Bitcoin rewards as a service, and you had consumer facing reward products, but we felt that a B2B solution was something that would be needed. And indeed it was. And we had great kind of uptake from a lot of great Bitcoin businesses, block streams using our reward solutions for their e-commerce store where they sell jades and different things like that. And so, but what we quickly realized is that, well, crossing this chasm into the more traditional world was very tough. It was going to be difficult. And so our ability to put really scalable revenue on the board, we're a very technology driven business that sort of needs and necessitates a kind of venture funded type of model. And so it's always a question of like timing, how quickly you can ramp and demonstrate revenue growth. And so early on, we were able to do a small pre-seed round in 2023, which was great. And some of our kind of early believers there, those were mostly angels, but a few others as well. We participated in, at that time, the Draper X Accelerator under Tim Draper. We earlier this year participated in the Outlier Ventures Bitcoin Basecamp program. So this was interesting because Outlier is a traditionally very like crypto focused sort of investor. And I think they've just seen a lot of the writing on the wall of developers and mindshare coming back to Bitcoin. And so they did a dedicated program to Bitcoin. And we use that really as a jumping off point to restructure our strategy around Taproot assets. And then, as you pointed out, we did the pitch day in Nashville. And so I think what the sort of moral of the story is all of these levers were important and needed. And I don't think there was any one thing we did that was like the killer solution. It was, really focusing on like, I think as a founder, you get so in your head about the business, you're so up close with the business that you completely forget that basically no one else cares or knows what you're doing. So you overestimate how aware people are of what it is that you're doing. And so it is just by participating in some of these things, yes, investment is part of the goal, but another part of the goal is just building awareness around what it is that you're doing so that people are familiar with that. So yeah, throw a lot of things against the wall, be very iterative and sort of test and learn oriented. But it's been a fun ride, at least so far.
Yeah, we'll have to hang another time and talk about a lot more detail on going through that. But you actually have real revenue now. Okay, this isn't like
Yeah,
a pie in the
yeah, yeah,
sky
yeah, yeah,
future.
yeah,
So
yeah. We do.
this is a post revenue company.
Post
Um,
post post revenue. We love to see it. Yeah, we so in 2024, most of our revenue is from what we'll call like implementation fees. And this is a really good sign, right? Before we had the full rollout of our Taproot asset capabilities, a lot of the revenue we've earned so far is clients that want this and are willing to pay up front, maybe for some sort of custom functionality and features. And so that's been great. We expect to land 2024 around 55,000 or so in revenue. So again, getting this off the ground, nothing to scoff at. And then as we head forward, we're now at the point where we can transition that revenue model to a much more scalable and recurring model around swap revenues built into the wallet and SDK and those sorts of things as well. So heading into 2025, we expect to see a lot more of that recurring revenue and growing from there as well.
So what about the moat? As far as competitors go, I mean, are there any? I mean, I haven't heard of any, but is there anything that sort of keeps you up at night as far as staying ahead or at least a few steps ahead?
Yeah, no, I think you're right that there's no one else, at least that we're aware of, that's doing kind of Taproot Assets as a service, Taproot Assets, wallet and SDK kind of combination. I will give a shout out certainly to Lightspark. Lightspark is having great success in the marketplace with their Lightning as a service kind of offering that's really catered towards like fintechs and neobanks, these types of entities. And they recently announced their Spark kind of idea. It's sort of Arc-like in its design for those familiar with Arc. It's very, very early days, but I think they have clearly seen a lot of the writing on the wall that we have around the interest and demand around stablecoins and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we think Taproot Assets, where it really shines, is you have just the lowest possible trust assumptions. And when you look at what's happening in the world, when you look at the reasons that people are flocking to things like stablecoins, yes, of course, there's an element of trust in that issuer, whether it's Tether or whomever, but there's certainly much less trust versus the fiat systems that they're used to. And so I think that's where Taproot Assets is really going to win the day. And we are the only company with a Taproot Assets SDK currently. So I think we have a huge first mover advantage. The other nice thing about how do you preserve that advantage? There's some really nice kind of tricks that Taproot Assets affords us via this. We now have like virtual UTXOs and how a lot of the tech works. You can do things like trustless batching of user transactions. So you can drive fees lower for users, the more users that you have coming in. And so this can be this sort of feedback loop that gives users better and better, more and more sort of cheap transactions, the more that the user base grows, at least on a per user basis, right? And so we see that as a really big, important aspect of how we preserve and build that moat and build that advantage.
Awesome. All right. Well, Mr. Producer tells me to keep it short. So maybe we around and do it again another time, or maybe I can hop on your channel.
Yes,
So
it would be a pleasure.
So once again, Joltz Rewards has an astronomical amount of stuff to read on their website and to learn about this new exciting area and what's coming and what's about to come. And Ian also has his own awesome YouTube channel, and we'll put all the links down to that below. And there's a live deal on Thunder Funder. So if you want to sign up, if you want to invest in Joltz as your first angel investment in their community round, they are our first deal, our first inaugural Thunder Funder deal. And it's super exciting. So in closing, Ian, is there anything that you want to say?
No, just a pleasure to have the chance to chat. Love what you guys are doing with Thunder Funder. We were super pumped to be the guinea pigs, and I'm pleased to say that it didn't really feel like we were guinea pigs. I think you guys did a great job with the process. I really see a huge potential in democratizing access to awesome Bitcoin startups. But yeah, we would love to chat with anyone who's interested in really trying to help drive Bitcoin's acceleration towards hyper Bitcoinization. We just think that stablecoins are an important part of that transitionary period. But excited to be on this journey, excited to be working together. And yeah, we'll definitely have to do another one of these soon.
Cool. And I also can't wait to take a weekend and just deep dive and play around myself with a Lightning Ventures sort of asset that maybe we can have and play with some of our investors and maybe some Thunder Funder ones and have some fun with this. All right, Ian, thanks so much for hanging. And we have no idea. Bitcoin might have already hit 100K. So we're going to end this and so we can check the price. All right, guys, have a good one. Thanks.